Welcome to Hospitality Reinvented. I'm your host, Doug Radkey, the founder and principal consultant with KRG Hospitality, an agency that helps new and seasoned bar, restaurant, and boutique hotel operators turn confusion into clarity, pressure into performance, and guesswork into growth. This is episode number 31, and today we're going to challenge something that most operators believe that they are doing well, which is training, or at least what they think is training. Because here's the truth. There is a fairly significant difference between training and onboarding. And confusing the two is quietly costing this industry millions in turnover and inconsistency and burnout and lost potential. Now, if you are running a bar, restaurant, or hotel, this episode might sting a little bit, which I've said since the very first episode. That is a good thing. That is how we are going to start to reinvent this industry. So the difference between training and onboarding, if you get this right, everything in your business can start to stabilize. And if you get this wrong, though, you are going to stay trapped in the hiring cycle for what seems like forever. Now, let me paint a picture here that every operator listening and watching likely recognizes. You hire somebody new. They seem sharp. They have that good energy, solid background, and then you or someone on your team shadows them maybe for a couple of shifts. They learn the POS system and the PMS system. They learn a bit of the operations and the guest journey. And then after a week, you think, great, they're doing well. They are trained. But then by month 2, their performance, it starts to, dip a little bit. By month 3, their attitude starts to shift. By month 4, they're becoming fully, disengaged. And then by month 5, they are gone. And then everyone, says people just don't want to work anymore, or people don't understand what it takes to win in this industry. Everyone has a bad attitude these days and a variety of other, excuses. But let me offer you a different perspective here. Maybe they just weren't properly onboarded, which led them to leaving. Maybe they were, only trained, and I will use those quotation marks around that. Now, here's the thing. Training teaches somebody what to do. Onboarding, on the other hand, teaches them who they are becoming inside of your business. Training, it says, here is how to enter orders. Here is how to prep the dish. Here is how to reset a room. Here is, how to open the bar every day. Onboarding, though, it says, here is who we are. Here is what we stand for. Here is what, excellence looks like here. Here is what you are going to be responsible for. Here is how you are going to grow. And here are, the resources to help you do your job better and easier. Training, it just fills shifts. Onboarding, though, that builds a team of leaders. And when onboarding is weak, guess what? Your culture becomes very fragile. Now, let me be bold here again for a moment. Most hiring gaps or even turnover is not a labor market problem. It is an onboarding failure. You've maybe, heard the phrase that people don't just leave jobs. So why do they leave? Well, they leave confusion. They leave unclear expectations. They leave inconsistent leadership. They end up leaving environments where accountability, feels random. Now, think about this with me for a moment here. If someone's first week is chaos, meaning, there is no structure, meaning there is no defined schedule or clear standard, meaning there is, no cultural context and no defined ownership. What message are you sending? What you are saying is, maybe welcome to the team. Now figure it out. That confusion in week 1 turns into frustration in month 3. And if expectations are not clear, accountability just feels unfair to them. When someone is held responsible for standards they were never clearly defined, they don't feel coached, they feel attacked. And that right there is not a staffing issue. That is a leadership issue. That is an issue that starts from the top. Now, here is why this happens so often. Operators, they're busy. They hire because they need immediate relief. They need coverage this coming weekend. They need someone on the schedule. So onboarding becomes fairly, compressed. Just maybe shadow Sarah for the day. Just follow this checklist here. Just get through the weekend, and then we can touch base, again next week, which that meeting never comes around. The intention isn't necessarily bad. What's missing is the structure. And in hospitality, structure is what protects culture, right? Now, let's be clear here. Onboarding is not a, warm welcome, filling out some paperwork, and maybe even a staff meal. Some places do that. Onboarding should be a non-negotiable system. It should, include a very structured interview process, a very, defined first day and first week. It should include, 30, 60, and 90-day milestones. It should provide clear ownership of development, and it should provide cultural immersion. This is not, vibes, not a day of shadowing, not throwing someone into the fire to see how they perform this coming weekend. It should be a system. And when someone starts, they should really know what success looks like during those first 30 days, what skills they are expected to master, who do they report to, and who mentors them, how feedback is both, provided and expected to be given, and what growth looks like within your business. If that is not defined, you are not onboarding. You are just hiring and hoping and just filling a role, and that right there is not scalable. Let's first look at what happens before even that first day. Again, too many operators think onboarding just starts on day one. But here's the thing. Onboarding starts the moment someone reads that job ad, the language, the expectations and the values that you communicate there shape who applies in the first place, right? Then comes the interview process, where the questions that you ask are extremely important and should tie, the responses back to your values. You want to stop hiring only for experience and start hiring for attitude, coachability, reliability, and an alignment with your culture. With the right training program and onboarding sequence, experience can be taught. Values, though, are much harder to teach. Now, finally, all of that first day admin matters as well, right? So that true first day is more actionable, so clear communications and schedules, paperwork, uniforms, and expectations, they remove anxiety and create confidence going into day one, right? So now looking at that true first day, that's the one that really sets the tone. So if that first day is rushed and chaotic or unclear, it plants doubt. But if the first day is structured, intentional, and aligned, it builds confidence. On day one, a new team member should, maybe walk away thinking, I understand what this place expects of me. That right there is onboarding. From there, the first week should not be any more random. It should have skill set checkpoints. It should have cultural touch points throughout it. It should have leadership interaction opportunities. It should have clear feedback mechanisms. If someone finishes week one unsure of where they stand, you just created instability. What you want is confidence after that first week, and confidence is built through clarity. Now, sometimes when I mention, the first 30 to 60 to 90 days to hospitality leaders, they look at me like I'm crazy. I've heard phrases on how that's just corporate jargon that does not work in the real world of bars, restaurants, and hotels. This is where operators, though, really start to resist. They think structured onboarding feels too corporate. Now, I'm going to reframe this here a little bit. Structure is respect. When you define milestones, what you communicate is that, you're taking this role seriously. And that's what people want. They want to be proud of the place that they work at. They should be excited to come to work every single day for you and your brand. So those first 30 days, that first milestone should be about, basic competence and cultural alignment. Then those first 60 days should be more about consistency and independent execution. And then those, 90 days should be more about ownership and accountability. And if someone hits, 90 days without knowing what their next step is, they end up disengaging, which leads to turnover, and then you complaining that no one likes to work here anymore, right? So if you go into this with the right mindset and structure, you will not need to rehire every 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It will save you time and money, which really leads me to my next point here that I want to go over. I want to talk about the cost here. Now, when I say costs, I don't just mean, in turnover. It's the cost of retraining. It's the cost of performance, gaps. It's the cost of, guest inconsistency. It's the cost of manager frustrations. It's the cost of, leadership fatigue as well. What happens is poor onboarding drains energy from your strongest leaders because they are just constantly correcting what was never clearly set in the first place. The real cost here, when you look at it, is momentum. You cannot build stability with a revolving door. But when onboarding is done right, guess what happens? Well, you're going to see that competence accelerates. You are going to see that retention improves. You are going to see that managers feel more supported. You will see that guest experience is very, consistent. And you will never, or, you will always see that owner dependency starting to decrease because now you have people who understand standards, who understand culture, who understand accountability, who understand growth. Onboarding is not an HR function. You do not need an HR department. It is a strategic function and a function that can be executed in small, independent operations. So what it does is it protects your brand, right? Now, if you're scaling or planning to scale, all of this matters even more. Inconsistent onboarding across multiple locations, it creates inconsistent brand experiences, right? If one unit onboards deeply and another one rushes it, your brand starts to fracture, right? So this is why strategic playbooks matter. This is why defined onboarding systems matter. This is why leadership accountability matters. All of the things that we've talked about on this podcast. And that is because culture doesn't scale through personality. Again, it scales through structure. And that structure is the mindset shift that is needed here. You need to stop asking how fast can we get them on the floor. What you need to start asking is how clearly can we integrate them into the culture. Stop thinking in shifts. Start thinking in milestones. You are not hiring for coverage anymore, right? You are hiring for stability. Now, let me be blunt here one final time here again. If your onboarding process is loose, your culture will always be fragile. If your onboarding is more structured, though, your business becomes predictable. Predictability creates profit. Predictability creates a sense of calm. Predictability, it creates stabilization and scalability. And this is what most operators want. Less chaos and more control, right? Now, onboarding is one of the most overlooked levers in achieving that goal. Now, before I wrap up here, let me just close here with this. Again, training is what fills shifts. Onboarding is what builds leaders and longevity within your operations. Training is more transactional, while onboarding is more transformational. And training is tactical, while onboarding is more strategic. If you want better retention and better performance and better culture and better stability, you do not need more training. You need a better onboarding system, because people in hospitality don't fail because they don't care. They fail because they didn't make the expectations clear enough. Thank you for listening to Hospitality Reinvented. Until next time, stay bold, stay strategic, and let's keep reinventing hospitality together.